I have here with me this wonderful panel that is going to be talking about what it's like to be out in business, and as well as hopefully giving you all some experience and hearing what it's like to be out in the real world working. I'm going to have the gentlemen introduce themselves.
Hello everyone, my name is John Dorr. I work with Enterprise Mobility. I'm an HR coordinator. I've been there for about a little over 3 years now.
I'm Al. I'm a behavioral therapist. I work in an elementary school with primarily autistic children, and I've been doing this for almost 6 years now.
Hi, I'm Adam. I'm a receptionist at Clark Hill, the Birmingham branch specifically. I started this job in January.
I am Gabe Tupin, so I am the talent development specialist for Enterprise Mobility, and I have been doing this for about 3 years now.
Thank you all so much. So the first question I'm going to ask is, what is your current role? And kind of if you could tell me about 3-4 sentences about it, just that way so we can because the other questions have a little bit more meat to them. So John, would you mind starting?
Sure. So as I said earlier, I'm a human resources coordinator. I started off in our management trainee track back in 2020. I was in that role for about a year, renting our cars, working with sales and risk management, and then I jumped into the HR field. I've worked all across the state of Michigan, but my primary role, I do onboarding, offboarding for the company. I work with more like our compliances, working with our airport employees at Detroit Metro Airport, variety of other things. I could go on and on, but I'll digress.
So I'm a behavioral therapist. I work, again, primarily with autistic children. So all I do on a daily basis is just advocate. It's really cool. Like I get to go into general education classrooms and, bring my friends along. And anytime they experience large emotions, I get to be the one who calms them and then teaches folks how to calm them down, which is really cool. And just advocating for, equality and equity, which is really important. Like it's not always going to look the same for every kid. And like just because this kid doesn't seem to meet your expectations outwardly doesn't mean that we have to treat him any differently, or we should expect any less competency just because we can't understand what they understand. So it's really cool. I take on an advocacy role all day long while simultaneously getting my behind kicked all day. So.
Someone actually described my job very succinctly earlier. It was kind of whenever somebody needs anything, I'm the person that they go to. If they have a question about something, or whenever clients come in, or whenever someone needs, a conference room, if someone needs me to, do most things, I can pretty much do that. Mostly I'm just kind of there for information and to sort of help the office run in sort of a more front, outward facing way.
Yeah, and so in my role, I really like to kind of call myself like the camp counselor of our company here in Michigan. So my primary role is really to support training and development for all of our employees. So I kind of have to be a jack of all trades and be able to understand different business lines, different levels of employees and what they need, and kind of develop training programs for them. So, thank you,
all of you. The next question is going to be, and you can take your time answering this, use as many words as you want. Tell us about your career trajectory that led to this role. John, you can start us off.
Yeah, so already jumped ahead a little bit. So I started off as a management trainee right out of COVID. And I started off over in the Ann Arbor location. That's where I was living at the time. And I did that for about a year, and I sat down with my mentor one day, and I'm sure we'll talk about that in a little bit, but I sat down with my mentor one day and I said, I want to do something that something that I feel is meaningful and, is more aligned with what I really want to do and, what my background is. I'm very people oriented. I wasn't the best at sales wholeheartedly, but I was good at selling the company. And so I decided to look more into the HR field. And so when an HR coordinator position came available, there was a position in Lansing, and I was living in Ypsilanti at the time, and I had to sit down with my partner and say, is this something that I think is going to be plausible? It's with traffic, about an hour and a half drive to get to Lansing every day, and they need me there 5 days a week. Am I willing to make this move? So I did. And I did that for about a year. I was working over at Lansing. We cover all of the west side of Michigan, all of the UP locations. So I was doing HR coordinator work over there. And then I made a transition over to our Wayne County location, doing HR operations there with our DTW team, our National Alamo team. Like I said earlier, my goal is to stay in the HR field, eventually move up to like an HR generalist, and hopefully an HR manager one day. So that's really, I wouldn't have jumped into the HR realm had it not been for enterprise.
Hey, John.
I kind of fell into this career, honestly. Like, I've always just been a very compassionate individual. I have a lot of, ASD or neurodivergent family members that I have 33 first cousins on my father's side alone. So, like, I was always around babies, always around kids. And then one person was just like, I think that you'd be really great for this role. And I fell in love with it. I don't think that there is a more rewarding job than working with children. And it's been an absolute joy to be there every single day. I love my job. I get up every single day with a smile. And it helps me almost heal my inner child and like also just realize that like there's always going to be a smaller person in a room to advocate for. That most marginalized identity is always going to make itself known. So like as somebody who is consistently working on, prioritizing the most marginalized identity, I get so much hands-on training every single day on how to advocate the most effectively, using the best kind of language and using professional language every day, which professionalism, in my opinion, is just covert white supremacy. But like, I believe that like we can destigmatize all of these ideas of professionalism, even through ASD folks or just like LGBTQ plus folks in the workplace, living their lives. So my career trajectory, I think, just like passion, like just compassion and passion, and I hope that it leads me further. I don't know where it's going to take me at this point, but I'm here for the ride. So
Thank you, Al.
So I've never been a receptionist before. I've done a lot of receptionist adjacent things. When I left college, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I didn't have any plans beyond just graduating and then getting a different job because I was working for Kroger at the time, and that was not a good time. So that was kind of my only goal, and then maybe, move out of the house probably, but those were kind of my goals. I didn't really have any long-term ideas. I didn't really know what I wanted. So I was just kind of going to different jobs. I worked at a hotel. I was front desk at a hotel, and then I was an admin assistant at a digital security company. And then after that, I just needed a job because they let me go very unexpectedly and on very flimsy, I would say, reasons, but whatever. So then I got the job that sort of led me to the firm, which is called an office services specialist. So basically I worked in the firm. I didn't work for the firm, but I worked for a secondary company, and I just did office things all day. Mail, copying, scanning, document production. That's most things that people couldn't do or needed somebody else to do. That was my job. And then I took on sort of a backup receptionist role while I was in that position. And then the current receptionist was leaving, and so the office manager asked me if I wanted the position, and I very much did, mostly because it paid me much better. The hours were better and everything was just better. So it's kind of not so much a trajectory as I worked in the same place for almost 4 years, and people knew who I was, and I happened to be in a very privileged position. So, but yeah, I've been working it since January, and I don't think I'm leaving anytime soon. I don't know if I want to be here forever, but who knows?
Adam, I really appreciate that response. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I had kind of an interesting career trajectory in the sense that I never thought I would be doing what I did today, which I think is a lot of people. Originally, I started out as a winemaker, so I was in the wine industry, and I loved it. I wanted to do it for the rest of my life. I was really set on that. And so I had worked at a few wineries, helped open a winery, and was really eating up that career. And then, 2020 hit, and like a lot of people, I found myself out of a job. And, for the first probably 2 months, I thought, okay, this is gonna, just blow over and everything's gonna go back to normal, which, as we know, didn't totally go back to normal. And so at that point, I realized, okay, I need to get a job, and it's not gonna necessarily be what I'm set on right now or the direction that I wanna go in my career, but I want to get something. So I started out with enterprise, and to be honest, I really didn't even know what enterprise was when I first applied, just because I had never rented a car before. And so, starting out, I was thinking, okay, I'm going to do this for a few months and then, kind of jump ship and get like a quote unquote, like real job. And while I was here, I realized, it was a career that was, training me to manage people, to manage a business. And it was so much more than what I thought. And so I started to love it. I moved up, and eventually, this position opened up internally to be the talent development specialist. And I took a chance and applied and ended up here. So I think if there's one theme that kind of ties my career trajectory together, it's having allowed myself to always be surprised about the different directions that I could go and not being too set in any one direction, because there might be a different direction that might have, presented itself.
Gabriel, I really appreciate that. Thank you.
I'm so sorry.
Do not apologize. Listen, I'm so glad to have you here.
Hello, I love this shirt.
Hi, Connor.
Hi.
I'm going to put you on the spot.
It's alright, that's the best way to be.
All right. So I wanted to ask you just 2 questions, just to kind of catch you up.
Yeah.
The first one is, what is your current role? You can introduce yourself, talk about your current role, do it in about 2 to 4 sentences, and then the next question will be, tell us about how your career trajectory has led to that role.
Yeah. Hi. I'm Connor Rivera. My pronouns are he, him, or they is fine. No she, please. So my job is I work for the Child and Family Life Department at CS Mont Children's Hospital in Ann Arbor, Michigan. My job role is the Therapeutic Gaming and Patient Technology Manager. Project manager. So what I do is I manage all of our technology that we use bedside with kids during procedures to distract them from the hospital environment, or just generalize just having fun because the hospital sucks, like in fairness. And then aside from that, I'm the Stream Promote coordinator, so I work with a bunch of content creators who help fund video games in the hospital. So it's kind of this full 360 piece to it. How did I land there? Previously, I was actually in school for higher education student affairs. I love the ideas of growing people and seeing communities come together. And through my other job, through technology, I've had this guy come in who was like, hey, like our iPads suck at the hospital. They're sending things to each other. Found out he was using video games with kids. If anyone's seen that like viral BuzzFeed video of Pokemon Go in the hospital, that turned out to be my boss years later. Yeah, full 360. So started volunteering, fell in love with it, realized kids say thank you instead of demanding things like a normal customer service job, and decided, hey, I'm going to jump off of where I was going and put everything into this, and it's been the most rewarding thing in the world.
Connor, thank you so much for sharing that.
Sorry, yeah.
It's all great. I'm going to go back to you, John. I wanted to ask you, what was the interview process like for this role? Maybe if you could tell us maybe 1 or 2 of the questions that you were asked as well, if you want to.
I'm trying to think. I mean, it was a pretty standard interview. The gentleman who interviewed me, he's just this extraordinary HR manager and made me feel very welcome, very included. I come to find out I was the only person that interviewed for this position, so I mean, there wasn't much competition, but wholeheartedly, it was a really smooth interview. He asked me why he thought I'd be a great fit for the position. I distinctly remember at the very end, just as as any standard interview, to kind of wrap up, they say, do you have anything else that you'd like to say? Anything else that you wanted to add? And I told them a lot about myself. I had never met this individual before, so I really didn't know, was he accepting of the, of the community? What is his, background and his stances and all these really, really, important things. And I remember telling him about my partner, and we had just bought a house together at Ipsy, and, just really being genuine and trying to kind of lay the groundwork of, if you hire me, this is who you're getting. And, it was one of those moments where it's, unfortunately in today's society could be a risk factor. But luckily it was a great interview process for sure.
Thank you so much for sharing, John.
Yep.
It was really simple. I did a Zoom interview. It was 2 people at the school, the superintendent and the principal at the school, one of the schools that I used to work at. And they just, one of the most dynamic questions they asked me at the end was just like, why do you want this job? Why do you want it? And I remember just saying, I just want to help. And that was it kind of blew their mind in a way, it to be so genuine, someone who's not going to try to I give 110% all the time, I just simple answers. And so I think that my personality just really won them over because I seemed the most genuine. But as far as questions or any type of it was a very almost conversation interview. So it didn't feel very pressured. And luckily I was for the first time I have a black woman boss, and that was a huge thing for me because it was a huge scary part for me to know if I'm going to be safe in this environment as a person of color working in a Rochester school, and it was really cool to see that. So it was very comforting. And that was a little bit different than in the interview processes that I'm used to. So
Thank you so much for sharing.
My interview process was, I think, a little different because, as I mentioned, I was kind of already semi-internal. Because I had worked in that building and I knew all the people who would be interviewing me and the people who conduct interviews and do the hiring process. But I had sort of, 3 smaller interviews. One with so there's a member in charge, there's a deputy member in charge. So in a law firm, there's attorneys, but some of those attorneys are members, which I think the simplest way to equate it is sort of tenure for professors. So the member in charge is sort of just the guy in charge in that particular office, and then sort of his assistant guy, and then the office manager. I will say that the office manager, I'd never had someone who was so genuinely excited to hire me. That was kind of the weirdest feeling. I was like, wow. She was like, oh, I'm so excited. It's gonna be so great. I'm so glad you said yes. And I was like, whoa, okay, cool. So I think that helped, because normally a job interview, it's like, oh, okay, well, yeah, I think we want to hire you. And I'm like, oh, thank God, I have a job. But this was, especially since she sought me out, and when someone seeks you out to say, hey, I see the work that you do, and I think that you'd be a good fit for this job, but also I like you as a person. That's cool, I think. So as far as questions, it was mostly, how would you handle a very busy day in the office, when you have 5 different clients here for 3 different attorneys, and the phone's ringing off the hook, and someone's calling and saying, hey, such and such isn't working, I need you to put in a maintenance request. And I got 5 emails and all of that stuff. Mostly I just said that I would just try to keep my head on my shoulders and just approach one thing at a time. And learning to prioritize is, I think, a big part of sort of managing a very busy, very stressful situation. But of course, your priorities look different depending on what you do. And a lot of that I kind of just have to figure out on the fly. But again, I had the privilege of knowing all the people I would be working with. And so it really helped in terms of sort of getting into the position as well.
Adam, thank you so much for sharing.
Caught my breath this time, sorry. So the interview process for me was a little different because I had previously started volunteering in that space. So it was kind of this weird, he was already aware of me working with kids and how I use the tech with the kids. But honestly, we wound up doing, I believe, 2 phone interviews. One was just him trying to figure out who I am as a human more than just a volunteer. The next one was because it's a very weird job role and it's something new coming into the hospital field. It's like, so if a mom says that the kid wants to play GTA, like, what are you gonna do? Like, really, like, kind of in the moment questions, or just kind of dealing with, harder things because it is a hospital environment. But I will say he was really cool, like, talking to him. There was one question of, like, are you involved in gaming communities? And I accidentally completely outed myself right then and there. I was like, yeah, like, when I was a little girl, I was involved in this gaming group. It was all women. He was like, all right, cool. Right? And that was just right then and there. And he's like, thanks so much. Like, I had no idea. Like, that's cool. I was like, that's the goal, man. And that from then on, I knew that was the right manager to be working with. If he had acted a different way, I probably wouldn't have even bothered with the next one. And then, of course, like, the in-person with, like, a panel of 20 people, and then ate it. So.
Thank you so much for sharing, Connor.
So the interview process for this role for me was twofold. So I had to have a presentation portion and then a panel interview. So presentation interviews, like it felt super, super intimidating because we had basically been given a presentation from our diversity, equity, and inclusion curriculum. And so we were to present that and to kind of give it our own style. And so I think that was something that actually, being part of the LGBTQ plus community actually became an asset because I had a lot of personal stories to be able to weave into that presentation and to kind of make it a little bit more personal and authentic. And so I remember, being in this small boardroom, we had like our vice president and a few other people from our corporate offices, and I was so nervous, and I remember feeling like my leg almost giving out at a certain point just from being so nervous. But I pushed through, and then I had a panel interview with a lot of our leadership on our HR team. That was actually a really great opportunity to be able to just kind of have a conversation with a lot of different people. So a panel interview almost sounds a lot more intimidating, but it actually turned out to be much better, I think, than a one-on-one interview.
Thank you, Gabriel.
Yeah.
So, our next question is, are you out at work? And if you feel like kind of sharing a little bit more, what is it like being out at work? How does that affect your daily work experience, or what is that like? So John, could you start us off?
Yes, I am out at work. I wholeheartedly, like I said, I could sell enterprise all day, but one of the things that I love about it is the fact that I really do feel like it's one of the more welcoming, organizations out there to work for. It's just I've never felt like I had to question who I was or hide who I was or not talk about my partner or like my personal life. And you just have to draw that fine line sometimes of what not to share or what to share in the workplace. And I've never had to really worry about that. Obviously within it's it's respectful and things like that. But it's been a very good experience. Just coming to work and not dreading my job and hating my job and the people that I work with, and it's fantastic. It's awesome.
John, thank you so much for sharing.
I do identify as queer at work. However, as an extremely cis-passing trans man, I do not have the privilege of outing myself at work. I work with children. The overwhelming stigma of LGBTQ plus trans people is, it's not the greatest. I don't need to be called or accused of anything just simply because of the identities that I have. Especially working in a place again like Rochester. I'm already a person of color. I talk a lot about racial disparities. I talk a lot about advocating for the most marginalized identity. I already lose jobs left and right for that kind of speech. I don't really think that I need to be targeted for my gender identity. So again, I'm extremely cis-passing. I also just so happen to be involved with women. So it's very nice. I could just talk about freely my partners, and no one really questions anything, which is really nice. It's a privilege of mine. So I do get to be myself wholeheartedly. I don't feel like I have to. The stealth seems almost covert. It's very. The only time that I feel like I have to change anything. It's like, oh, I used to play baseball instead of softball. I played football when I was a kid, so it's really easy to talk about my childhood and stuff like that. But outing myself, unfortunately, I just don't have the safety to do that at the moment, and I wish that one day it will be more safe, but at the moment,
I'll thank you for sharing that. Adam?
It actually took. I hadn't actually started talking about being queer at work, or at least in the law firm, even with coworkers that I saw, 8-9 hours a day every day. I didn't start talking about it until I think last year. I think maybe something, I don't know. Part of it is, yes, I am a very anxious person, and so I often think a lot about what's the worst case scenario, or even what's the most mildly inconvenient scenario, because I just don't want to show up to work and say something and then have that person look at me funny and then sit there and know that there's this really weird, uncomfortable energy between me and this person, and we got along really well, and now what if we don't? And so that's part of it, but also I was like, I don't really think it's anyone's business. I almost swore. I don't know how professional we're trying to be. So
PG-13.
Okay. I don't think it's anyone's heckin' business. At least not, not at work and everything. And I only worked sort of in a small team of 5 people. I mean, I interacted with everyone at the firm all the time, but I was like, I don't care about these people. But I started talking about it, and I mentioned my partner a few times, and I'm really grateful that we live in a time in which partner is much more freely used, and it does not automatically have like a gay connotation, because even when I didn't want to talk about being queer, I can still talk about my partner, or at least in the world that I live in, that's what I've noticed, is that partner is more freely used, and it doesn't automatically have that connotation. I talk about my partner all the time now. And that's great. A friend of mine, I was actually thinking about this question on the drive over. A friend of mine when I was in college, and this was, I don't know, maybe 2016, 2015, a friend of mine very lovingly said to me, I don't think anyone's gonna think you're straight. And I'm like,
oh no.
I'm okay with that, because I'm okay with that. I thought it was very funny, and so I just kind of enter a situation just kind of automatically thinking that someone's probably going to think I'm queer, and I'm fine with that. The trans thing, however, it is, I don't know if I try to be stealth so much as I just don't talk about it. I think I've almost accidentally outed myself at work lots of times, because I talk about being trans all the time because it's part of my life and my experience. But yeah, that softball thing. I've mentioned to people that I played softball as a kid, and now I'm like, oh well, no one said anything, so oh well. Someone thinks something, they haven't said anything, and that's good enough for me. I'm now very quietly out to a couple of people at work that I talk to a lot. And part of that is because Adam is not my birth name. It's not even my legal name. So I was using my birth name at work because when I started the job, I had it for a month in 2020, and then everything else happened in 2020. And so then I left, and then I came back in August, and I didn't realize that I wanted my name to be Adam until probably February of 2020. And so I had this really weird time where I was like, I think I'm gonna use a different name now. And then I was like, I have to go back to work. What on earth am I gonna say to these people? You knew me for a month and a half with a different name. I'm just not gonna say anything. It's fine, it'll be fine. I can separate that. It was not fine. It didn't feel good at all. But I was like, well, this is fine. I'll just try and keep a tighter sort of separation between my work life and my personal life. But it's really hard to feel like myself at work when I'm not even using the right name all the time, or if I'm not even just acknowledging that that is me, even though I have a different name. But then I got the opportunity to do this reception job. And I was like, it would be a really good idea because I'm going to have a name. I mean, I have a name tag, I have an email, I have a email signature, I have a phone extension, all these things. My name's going to be everywhere. And I was like, what I should do is I should say, it took me lots of months to come up with this really clever idea. I was like, I should say that Adam is my middle name. And I'm just going to say I use my middle name outside of work. And it never came up organically. And I felt like an evil genius hatching this plan while I was on the drive home. I was like, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. It's going to be great. And most people are like, oh, so is that your name? I'm like, yeah. Everyone calls me outside of work, it just doesn't. And there are actually lots of people, or at least a few people that I even work with that use their middle names. They just don't even use their first name. So it kind of worked, and it still works. And I'm just consistently patting myself on the back for being brave enough to say to the office manager, hey, so by the way, can we just real quick work this out? And so, I think about 90% of people in the office call me Adam regularly, which is cool. Whether people think there's a trans connotation there, I don't know, because no one said anything to me about it. And that's fine. And as far as, I think using my name definitely helps me feel better at work. Talking about my partner all the time is great because it feels genuine, and I'd like to talk about my partner all the time. But I think that knowing that at least the people I work with, or the people that I talk to regularly at work and interact with the most, aren't going to look at me funny or aren't going to make a comment, or I don't know. If they talk about me to other people, I don't really care because I don't know about it. If it gets to me, then I'll start to care about it. But so I think being more genuine and more true to myself definitely helps, especially since I'm so frontward facing and I interact with clients all the time. I'm not going to talk to a client who's here for an hour meeting. I'm not going to bring up my partner. I'm not, just because that's my job doesn't mean I like to have conversations with the people that come in. But yeah.
Thank you, Adam. That was great. It was heckin' awesome. Connor.
Obviously, I came out to my boss in the interview, but past that, working with children, immediately I went into stealth mode. I'm dealing not only with the children, I'm dealing with their parents and their families. And sometimes at the worst times in someone's life, especially end of life, the one thing they resort to is very much religious beliefs and not wanting to be the reason their kid couldn't have fun or engage in an experience because of my identity clashing with their beliefs. That was just not in my cards, that was not an idea, but also in that job of serving people, I learned it was no longer about my identity, it's about theirs, right? So empowering them rather than empowering myself, and I found that was actually empowering me in a different way. But that's with the population I'm serving. When I leave their rooms and I'm with the staff, so child life is a very small field. They basically are advocates for the patients. So they kind of bring everything down to something where a kid can understand what it is. So, you get medicine to lower this thing so we can take it out, rather than it's a neuroblastoma, we're going to inject it with whatever. So I stayed stealth for about 5 years. I came out to a few people. My immediate team knew because I was like, I'm spending the most time with you, it's going to come out eventually, whatever. And then there were a few people I picked through COVID lockdown, when the only way that people could connect was through social media, online. At the time, we were going through an amazing, wild politic run.
It's putting it lightly.
Jesus, right? The Black Lives Matter movement was pushing so hard, and I'm just internally just infuriated. I can't do anything. I can't say anything. Especially with Michigan Medicine, they have general careful what you say outside of work. And I was like, F that, man. So eventually I just like accepted. Everyone's like, all right, we're talking about it now, right? I'm trans. I'm open. I'm opening up to you. I was scared to before because I didn't want to lose my job. Michigan Medicine does have a statement and a policy that there is no reason to be fired based off your race, gender identity, sexual orientation, any of that. So I knew it was safe. It was just that general culture piece. Because with that child life field being so small, the main places that that degree is done in is private Catholic colleges. So I am one of 3 men on a team of 90 women, for perspective, that all went through those things, and they are very religious too from the different things. And I respect them, and they have immediately respected me. With that coming out, of course, you get the generic, do you want to join the DEI committee? Let's join that quick. And basically kind of put them in their, not so much in their place, but kind of called them out directly on like, this is what you're doing, this is what you shouldn't be doing, this is what we should probably do. And since then, it's kind of played into it. There have been a few patients that have figured it out. Getting clocked by like an 8-year-old is something you just don't expect. I'll be honest with you. So one of the things that I've learned is to kind of keep very small hints towards it. So like the controllers on my lanyard, they're all the different pride flags. So somebody who needs to see it will see it, and they will know that like this person is someone I can talk to, and I'm able to build a better rapport with that patient and uncover different things with them. And then they'll be like, are you trans too? And I was like, buddy. That's not what we talk about here.
I have a question. Are we gonna have a Q&A?
We will have a Q&A.
Okay, I'll save it for that.
Save it till then.
Yeah, so now it's basically just coming out to everyone, or like literally just in casual conversation. Oh yeah, by the way, I'm trans, and just continuing with my like staff team. But with patients, boundaries are so important with the populations you are serving, even if they are the same as you. I can't express that enough. Otherwise, you carry it home in different ways. So out to my colleagues, not to the kids.
Connor, thank you so much for sharing that. Gabriel, sorry.
Yeah, so I, obviously because part of my interview for my current role, I talked a lot about being part of the queer community. I'm out at work to my coworkers presently, and I think that manifests in a lot of interesting ways. And I think, even reading this question, what is that like in your daily work experience? At first, I was like trying to think a little bit harder about that, because I think day to day I don't always necessarily see that come to the forefront too much, with my boss and my other coworkers. But whenever I'm facilitating a DE&I training for our new hires, I do this exercise the first day before they ever get to know me. And, I kind of let them know, we're going to talk a little bit more about implicit bias and the assumptions that people make a little bit later. But before we get into that, I want you guys to take out a piece of paper, don't write your name down, and I want you to make 3 assumptions about me. And it could be anything, am I married? Am I, gay or straight? Do I have kids? Where do I lean politically? And so a lot of people, like, it's their first day, they don't know what to say, and that's kind of like, it's uncomfortable for some people. But you start to realize how interesting it is how people perceive you without really even knowing too much about you. And so when we go into that section, I'll start to read them off, and sometimes they're, funny, silly things. And then other times, it can be all over the place. And some people will say I'm gay, some people say I'm straight, some think I'm married, have kids. And so it's interesting when I eventually, tell them more about my life, like the people who might have thought I was straight are kind of surprised, and that leads into more of a dialogue. And so it's been a great opportunity to kind of take that risk of being out in work, just because it allows me to have those conversations and kind of educate people who otherwise might not have asked certain questions. I think previous to this role, when I wasn't as out, I was working in a branch with all men, all straight men. And so I think as a queer person, you always walk into that sort of situation kind of a little bit on guard. And you kind of have to feel it out and see like, okay, is this going to be kind of a safe environment for me to come out in? And, you know, none of my coworkers had ever expressed anything or said anything that would lead me to believe that they would react negatively to me coming out. But I still think sometimes there's always that hesitancy that you have that just comes from, you know, your upbringing. And so one day I said, okay, you know, screw it. If people don't like me just like being myself in this environment, then this environment isn't for me at all. So I was having a conversation with my boss, and I mentioned like what I was doing on the weekend. I was going to go to my then boyfriend's work event, and I just said like boyfriend, and it's almost, you know, anyone who's ever had to come out has felt that like those words almost don't come out. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, like he didn't blink, he didn't flinch, he didn't go, oh, I didn't know you were gay. He was like, oh, like what does he do? And it's just the relief that you feel after that when you're like, oh, this, you know, wasn't going to go down a bad path. It's just I had to take that initial step of coming out, which, you know, if it's a matter of safety, you obviously aren't always afforded that opportunity. But I think that I realized at that point, like when I'm able to and when I understand that it is a safe situation, to, you know, to come out and to kind of be visible in that way, because that opens the door for so much more dialogue and to help to start to facilitate a little bit of a mutual understanding with people who might not even necessarily know any queer people. So I think that that visibility aspect has been a really big part of why I continuously come out at work. And, you know, coming out is always continuous, you know, because in our culture, in our society, straight is always kind of assumed to be the default. So that has really kind of been my experience of being out at work.